It is cold. It is snowing in Canada, across the country. In Canada's most important city, Fort McMurray, it's minus 22 today. How do you keep warm? Well, you can get all high-tech and fancy, or you can go old school. Speaking of which, let's talk to our friend Alan Herscovici from the Fur Council of Canada, who joins us now from Montreal. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, tell me what you're wearing. That looks gorgeous and warm and comfortable. What's that?
It's an example of the new way furs are being treated today. This is actually sheared beaver. So beaver, like the founding of our whole country on the trade with beaver, but done in a completely new way, reversible, as a vest, easy to wear. And that's the sort of thing we're seeing a lot of now. That's why a lot of younger people are are experiencing fur for the first time.
Montreal is a very fashionable city, and so I would imagine fur is popular there. But in other parts of the country, I think that there's a political correctness that's anti-fur. What's your moral response to that?
I find it very frustrating because, in fact, every major conservation organization in the world today, the World Wildlife Fund, the World Conservation Union, they all support the sustainable use of wildlife and other renewable natural resources. And you have these activist groups like PETA saying, oh, we don't need fur, we have all these new synthetics, but they tend to be made from petrochemicals. And I'm not against the oil industry or against plastics, but let's face it, they're not better for the environment. So it seems so counterproductive. And in fact, fur, we've had a fur trade for over 400 years in Canada. The biologists tell us there's as many beaver now probably as there were when Europeans first came. That's quite an environmental success story. And I mean, furs like I'm wearing, they last such a long time. All of this makes a lot of environmental sense. So then people say, well, you're killing animals. And I say, well, yeah, but 97% of us in Canada and North America, we eat animals. We do accept the responsible use of animals as long as it's done responsibly, and the fur trade certainly is today.
We were just looking at some disgraceful propaganda from PETA on the screen as we were talking. It gets me so mad. You know what, Alan, I was up in the far north in the summer, and I was talking to Aboriginal people. You know what they said to me? They said, we used to be trappers, and then the Greenpeace put us out of business by ending fur. And then we got into forestry, and Greenpeace put us out of business then. And now they're trying to stop other resource development like oil and gas. I think there's a bit of an ethnocentrism here, Alan, when fancy, self-righteous Europeans tell Canadians, especially Aboriginals who've been harvesting animals for millennia, you're not morally good enough for us. I think there's a sneering to it. This from Europe that buys the majority of its oil from Saudi Arabia and even from Iran.
Well, and you're right. I think there's something even deeper going on. There's a sort of arrogance of the city, this hyper-urbanized society. And, you know, we would look at India in the past and say they had a caste system and it wasn't right. But I think groups like PETA are sort of introducing a new caste system, that anyone who actually works on the land, who actually produces something, as you're saying, whether we look around our fancy offices, our urban life, but everything does come from the land. Ultimately, the wooden desk, you know, comes from a forest. You know, the plastics come from an oil well. People have gone out and got their hands dirty, and look who's being attacked by all these activist campaigns. It's all the people who actually go out and do the work on the land and get themselves dirty. It's a strange kind of a cultural imperialism, and it's anti-environmental. That's the main point. But, you know, if you want to know who PETA really is, take a look at PETAkillsanimals.com, a side of the PETA story that you don't hear very often.
We've talked about that on the show. You know what, it's a great point, Alan, because PETA doesn't believe in animal welfare. They believe in animal rights.
No use whatsoever.
Yeah, so they don't actually try and make life better for animals. I mean, they actually euthanize thousands of animals. It's terrifying, but I think you're onto something when you talk about sort of a snobbery, that anyone who works with a hard hat or works with the land is somehow grubby and we have to get away from it. I think you're so right. I mean, you ask I bet you ask some of these city slicker protesters against fur, you say, well, where does food come from? They say, oh, from the grocery store. You say, where does electricity come from? They'd say, oh, from the outlet on the wall. But you are actually in touch with people who live in the land, and we're actually part of the ecosystem.
Well, that's the thing, you know, and what, you know, when you wear fur, I agree with animal rights groups is only one thing. They say we wear fur, should remember it comes from animals, and I agree. I think when we wear fur, we should remember how much comes from the land, and that we have to protect the forests and protect the land, because that's really where our life comes from, and not from a plastic computer screen. You know, but it's funny too. We've had minus 26 here in Montreal until just the last few days, and we didn't see many of the sort of anti-fur, you know, I'd rather go naked girls around at all in the streets. You know, but you know, more seriously, it's a strange double think. On the one hand, we're wearing leather, but so in other words, leather is just sort of the fur of a cow with the fur scraped off. So if we scrape the fur off, then it's okay. or if it's a synthetic, that's okay. It seems so contradictory. So it's up to us, though, I think, as the fur trade. The only reason you haven't heard the other side is the fur trade is such a small-scale traditional industry, and media, as you know, doesn't have the resources to go out in the woods and talk to the trappers, and it's the animal rights people in the city who can dominate the media. We're trying to correct that. We have a website, furisgreen.com, and we're trying to speak out and put a little balance into the story, because if we really do care about nature, then the people who actually live on the land, they have a lot we can learn from. It's not that they're perfect, but they actually live there. They actually know something about it. They have a personal direct interest to protect the land. And instead of attacking them, I think we should be listening a little more to them. And then fur, it is an old idea, but as we start to think more about our ecological values and how we should live in relation with the planet, fur makes a lot of sense, because every species does produce more young than the habitat can support, and we can use part of that. It's like using the interest without depleting our capital. And that's the whole fundamental today of modern ecological thinking, and groups like PETA are totally off base. And I think it's time that we have to speak out, and people can be proud to wear fur. And also, there's so many cool new ways it's being done. A new generation of designers have come on stream that are treating fur in very different ways. So there's really fur for everyone today.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show. I'd like to have you on again. I mean, we just scratched the surface. And by the way, folks, when you look at the beaver on the back of the nickel, that's fur history that helped build this country. Alan, thanks for being here today, folks.